I'm Alan Wartes, and this is ThinkRadio Presents ThinkPeople. My guest today is Kriste Peoples.
For me, a couple of years ago, I think I fully committed to saying yes to myself. Shonda Rhimes has a book, My Year of Yes. And she realized that she had been saying no to different opportunities that might make her uncomfortable or might open the door to an uncertain future. And she decided to walk through them. And it was really inspiring to me because I felt like there was this Christie that I wanted to meet. I knew she was in there, but how to get at it. And I think that is the universal story.
Welcome to another great conversation on Think Radio. If you like Think People, then I know you'll enjoy the other shows in the Think Radio Presents family of podcasts. Think Business, a weekly discussion with entrepreneurs, innovators, and disruptors on sustainable business into the 21st century. Think Planet, conversations with thought leaders on important environmental issues. Subscribe to Think Radio Presents on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever else you get great content. And don't forget to help us spread the word by liking our social media channels and sharing the content we post. We're grateful to have you in the conversation on Think Radio Presents. My guest today is Kriste Peoples. She's a writer, a speaker, producer, and in her bio describes herself as a good energy ambassador and sunshine enthusiast. Could use a lot more of those. Kriste is the co-founder of the Black Women's Alliance of Denver and also describes herself as an outdoorist. She's a passionate advocate of anything that breaks down barriers between human beings, but focuses particularly these days on obstacles that have traditionally stood between people of color and enjoying the outdoors. She has a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from Arizona State University and has put that degree to good use as an impressive word magician. Kriste?
Ooh, thank you. I want to get to know her.
Yeah, right? Well, we're about to.
Sweet. Okay.
Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me.
You know, I went to your LinkedIn page to get to know you a little bit in advance of our interview, and I was astonished at the number of things you've done in your career. You describe it as the number of hats you've worn. I mean, it's impressive.
Well, thank you.
and you're truly a Renaissance woman. And that's, I love meeting people like you because in my experience, there's always a great story behind how it is that you come to be who you are. So that's my first question. How do you get to be Kriste Peoples? What is your origin story?
You know, I feel there are lots of different points of origin in terms of, you know, entering different chapters in one's life. You know, maybe we say yes to certain things that get us through the door of a particular job or get us in that relationship or that get us into, you know.
Little moments that we don't really know at the time are so big, right?
Exactly. And looking back, you see the breadcrumbs that led you to this place. For me, a couple of years ago, I think I fully committed to saying yes to myself. Shonda Rhimes has a book, My Year of Yes. And she realized that she had been saying no to different opportunities that might make her uncomfortable or might open the door to an uncertain future. And she decided to walk through them. And it was really inspiring to me because I felt like there was this Christie that I wanted to meet. I knew she was in there, but how to get at it. And I think that is the universal story, a universal feeling that we all share, like wanting to self-actualize in the world. And so one consistent theme throughout everything I've done has been not only saying yes to something that makes me a little scared, but also taps into that person that I want to become. And it's not necessarily about being fearless, because there's some fear involved. Otherwise, there wouldn't be that tentativeness about trying new things.
Right, it wouldn't represent an obstacle at all.
Exactly. And so for me, I had grown up being told, you know, oh, you can't do that, or you need permission, or you're not enough in some way or another, which also is a very common story to many.
When are we going to stop doing that to ourselves?
Whenever we choose.
Yeah.
Whenever we choose.
Excellent. Well, I pick now.
And so, good. I'm with you on that because that's something that breaks down barriers between people.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I realized is the more that I say yes to myself, the more that I give myself permission to be seen and to be heard and to share my story, the more it gives people permission to do the same. So when I show up and I lead people on an outdoor excursion, people who might not otherwise have ventured into the outdoors. It's giving them permission to explore for themselves or to tap into something in their own adventurous nature. When I speak to groups of women or facilitate events that cultivate a sense of sisterhood, that create a safe space, that gives women permission to show up and be their true selves, you know? When I write something that might be a little difficult or tender for me, it gives me permission, again, to really be in the world and take up space. So maybe if there was one like central point of origin, it might be to answer that call to bring myself fully to the moment in whatever it is that I'm doing.
Yeah, and what did it cost you to answer that call?
Well, it cost me comfort. It cost me security. And it cost me, well, let me say a little bit about that. Comfort in terms of being too, I think culturally we're too used to feeling good or wanting to placate ourselves, calm ourselves, sedate ourselves to life, to numb out when things get hard, to retreat, if not avoid difficult conversations or challenging moments.
Sure, we're a self-medicating bunch.
Exactly, and yet we're overwhelmingly sick, right? So the medicine, in my humble opinion, is to really go into those places that are scary and that offer us a new way to really emerge in the world, you know.
And so what in particular scared you when you really decided, no, it's time to say yes? What were the kinds of things that you faced? And I ask because we've already talked on this idea that these are universal topics. I mean, there's no one person that can say, I never struggle with anything.
Right. I'll give you a recent example. Someone approached me. I had been on a women's empowerment panel a few years ago, and a woman approached me who was on the panel with. She approached me the following year and said, hey, I want you to be part of this new movement that we're trying to create. Think of it as TED, as in TED Talk, right? Think of it as TED's younger, sluttier sister. who's all about
I love it already.
self-help and a little bit of body talk, you know. Women who are entrepreneurs and leaders in their various regards. I want you to come and speak, be part of that evening.
Wow.
We're thinking that there might be 300 people there. Will you do it? And I said, well, wait, I'm not an entrepreneur and you've never heard me speak. I don't know why, I'm being invited to this thing. And so I said, yes, because it's scary to me. At that time, it put me at my edge because, 300 people and I'm supposed to be talking about some sensitive things. I don't know. Okay, I'm going.
Yeah. I hate this. Let's do it.
Right. Hurts so good. Right. Hashtag hurts so good.
Yeah.
The following year, and it turns out there were 400 people there. And then the following year, I got a call from one of the organizers of the Women's March of Denver. And she invited me to come speak. And I said, well, how did you hear from me? Was it from how did you hear about me? And what are we looking at here? And she said, there might be 4,000 people, at this event, but we want you to come and speak. And so I said, okay, yes, because that was scary. And it turned out that the Women's March of Denver was one of the largest in the country. More than 250,000 people showed up and jammed the streets. So again, saying yes to things that are scary to me and to my own growth is a tremendous experience. A couple of weeks ago, I completed a 50K up near Breckenridge.
Wow.
And let me tell you, towing that line, showing up with all the fear and anxiety that had been just coursing through me in the weeks leading up to it was enough to stop me if I had if I'd given myself permission
half
to
a chance to back out, you would have taken it.
Yeah. And as it was 10.4 miles was each loop, and you had to go up into the mountains and this ridiculous climb. Each time I came back out, completing the loop, I thought, nobody will blame me if I stop. Can I do this? Is my training up to it? And, but I kept going. And by the time I came across that finish line, more than 7 hours later, one thing I realized is that any fear that I'd gone in with had just burned off because I had literally run through it. Just the physical act of showing up and moving through it. Not to say everybody has to run like nearly 32 miles in the mountains
right?
at altitude.
Thank God. Because...
But physically, there's a lot to be said for showing up and being afraid and feeling overwhelmed and anxious about life. But if you do that one thing that you've come to do, which is run that race one step at a time, you will get there.
Sure. I mean, by the time you've completed one lap, now there's no excuse because you can do it. You just did it. You already know that it's possible.
Right, and this is a metaphor, a parallel to life.
Well, speaking of that, then, because you've said not everybody's going to run a 32-mile race. Not everybody's going to speak in front of 4,000 people, or what turns out to be 250,000.
Right.
Most people are living lives that they consider very much more ordinary, and so would you agree with the idea that it's easy to miss those opportunities in day-to-day life if you're just, your day consists of getting the kids to school, paying the bills. What advice do you have for those people who are looking for those opportunities for themselves? Yeah.
It's so interesting that you ask me that, because when I sit across from people and I interview them and ask them the same thing, how does this shake out for people in daily life, for like normal people, I think once again, it's finding that thing that you want to do. Talk to that person that you want to become and ask him or her what she needs from you today. So you're paying that bill. Look at, hey, how did I earn that money to pay that bill? How do I feel about how I earned that money? Is there something else I can do if I'm not so satisfied with that? And what is this job affording, or requiring of me, right? Is there room to maybe to shift or pursue another interest at work? Maybe I can drum up some courage to pitch that project, or to take on something new, or to set a boundary at work to say no. These are all incremental ways to say yes to yourself.
Every single one a valid step.
Every day, yes. You're taking your kid to work, maybe cut off the electronics and have a conversation to really check in and have your child come to know who you are in your fullness. Get to know your child and what's really happening in their day-to-day inner life. We have a million opportunities every day to choose a new path, to take a different step, to say yes to adventure. And again, it's not this big, boisterous, epic, Mount Vesuvius thing. It can be, hey, I'm gonna pick up my socks in the room today. I'm gonna just clear some space off of my desk just to give myself some more spaciousness in my life, just to stop crowding my mental space that's keeping me from having a clear idea about what I want to do next. Because there are a lot of ways, I think, if we look around our lives from where we are right now, that we sabotage ourselves or we still that small voice inside us because we're afraid of what it's going to demand. We know it's going to ask a lot of us.
Sure.
We know when we start to answer those calls, it's going to take us to big uncharted territory.
There's a trade-off every time.
Yeah.
And you've already said that just showing up is such a powerful choice. That's what we don't do.
Right.
We don't make time for those conversations with ourselves that you're talking about.
Right.
Well, you've worked with a lot of people and given a lot of advice along these lines. What's the payoff? What do you see happen in people's lives when they take this advice and they start to say yes, even to those very small things?
Well, interestingly enough, I see people's lives or daily experiences start to get dismantled a little bit. Start to go a little wobbly. Yeah, because when we show up and we say that whole body, wholehearted, fully integrated yes, even if it's not fully integrated yet, if it's yes on some level and that part of us hears us, then it starts to really that new experience starts to constellate. All those little, happenstances or synchronicities start to show up and say, okay, beyond a doubt, they say, hey, it's go time, right? And so if the people in your life, your kids, your partner, your parents, your colleagues, your crew, if they're not on board with that, with you showing up and saying, this is who I really am, the wheels start to rattle on those,
Because it threatens people.
It threatens people. You cannot change, we cannot change without changing everyone around us, right? People think, again, how can I change the world? I don't like what I'm seeing in the world. But the thing is, what's inside, right? Because it's probably something inside us that we can start to work with.
Yeah.
It's one thing to go out and march and protest and sign the petitions and stuff, but to come home and sit with yourself and say, you know what? I am deeply afraid, discontent, and unsatisfied with my life. You show up and tell people that truth.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. Really starting to, and I mean, even in that first thing, there were lots of ramping up to that. But once we do start to really set ourselves on that path in these small ways, they start to add up in this really big cumulative experience of, I'm not the same, I'm not the same person in this relationship. So if you're not ready to change or embrace that, then we're going to have to do something here.
Yeah. And once you get a taste of that, would you say that it's not something that you really want to let go of again? Once you start to see the possibilities, it's harder to go back into the genie bottle, so to speak, and resume your previous life.
Right. And that's the other thing. I think there is some grief that has to happen. I think a lot of times people say, shine your light. Let it shine in the world. Stand up and roar and do all these things. But people, I think what's often overlooked is that shining light is inconvenient to a lot of people, right, who might not be able to stand the glare. who might not have asked for you to come, who might have been counting on you being a dim bulb, And so you show up, you have to not only face resistance from the culture that says, you know what, we don't want to hear from you. You're supposed to be marginalized.
That's not the role we assigned you.
That's right. Yeah, and you show up at your work and you have boundaries, in your life. It's going to be challenging because it's a choice that you have to make repeatedly in order to ingrain or entrain that process of change, right? Because it's one thing to say, yeah, I'm gonna go do this thing. I'm gonna say yes, like the polar bear plunge that people do, on the 1st of January, right?
Crazy people do that here.
Right. And so you can go and you can do that big, bold thing once, and then you go home, you sit by the fire, and you numb out the rest of the year, right? So it's the thing about how can we sustain change? How can we stay the course?
And for that, it seems to me, we need each other.
Absolutely, because we don't do anything alone.
Yeah.
Despite what we might think or what the culture tells us or what other people might say, but speaking of the culture telling us that we do things alone, that's the whole thing, right? Like the bootstraps thing. You can do it alone, the dogged American ideal.
That's our mythology.
That's right, and that's what it is. It's a myth because the truth is I can't get to where I need to be in my life if I don't have the support and the encouragement or even the collaboration with the people I need to set me on my path, right? So imagine somebody listening to this or watching this, or somebody stumbles across this and it's the message that they needed for that day. Had you not said yes and shown up to do your work, it wouldn't be there. That opportunity would be missing for that particular person.
I love it. It's an unbroken chain, and
That's
we
right.
all play a part. We all form a link.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Excellent. What does the outdoors have to do with all this?
So, well, first of all, the outdoors it's the earth that we live on. If we didn't have the earth, nobody would be here.
Speaking of a link in the chain, it's
that's
the
right.
link, right?
That's right. The outdoors is, on the one hand, it's an industry, or there's been a lot of talk and groundswell of interest in the outdoors as an industry, which is its own thing. And to me, the outdoors is, among other things, it's a sanctuary and a safe haven and a testing ground as well. So when I came to Colorado in 2009, I landed in Boulder, and I was looking for a community and a sense of home, and trying to find those people, like my people, was really hard. And so I wound up taking to the trails, going up into the mountains. And I realized there, mountains, they don't care. Earth, she doesn't care about what I look like. She doesn't care about how much money I make. She doesn't care about the brands that I might have or the groups that I'm affiliated with.
What boots you're wearing.
That's right. Or what my bootstraps look like.
Right.
She welcomes me in, non-judgment, And so that right there was my call. That was the initiation into nature for me. Just being able to be in that space and feel at home and feel really grounded and connected and replenished and restored. And so I realized that the more or the faster I went on the trails, the more I could see And so that got me started trail running. I'm like a lifelong runner and all that. And so then I became a trail running coach a couple of years later down the road, which is another thing for like taking women out on the trails and like helping them like really strengthen and develop that desire, that inner,
and confidence.
athlete.
I mean, the ability to say, I did this.
Absolutely. Running up mountains day and night. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But, I also realized in exploring these trails that I didn't see many people like me. And I wanted to see more people like me because I knew I couldn't be the only one. And that led me to putting out the call for other Black women to say, hey, come join me on the trails, or come, let's have some safe space in nature, because it's really replenishing and restorative, and we need to bear witness to each other just to have a sacred space to be, And so, and it's not just with Black women, but with any groups that I go out with and lead and join and support. The outdoors and nature itself helps to sort of cultivate or call up our own inner nature that's kind of wild and unrestrained and unbuttoned up. You know what I mean?
I do. I mean, the word that came to my mind was uncivilized.
Yes.
We like to think of ourselves as so civilized, but what have we lost? And
Exactly.
it's what you're describing.
Yeah, and it really stirs up that sediment and gets us and brings us to that sense of aliveness that we can carry back into our daily lives. And we can also make nature and the outdoors part of our daily lives. It doesn't have to be the getaway, but it can be the go-to, and the part of the beingness,
No matter where you are, right?
Exactly.
You can find it.
That's right. Bringing, that's the other thing about the outdoor epic thing that people think, going out into nature is. But, you have houseplants in your home. That's bringing nature in. Those are living, breathing beings that lend support to your daily life. You know what I mean? Even before you set foot on the mountain or get your crampons or your puffy jacket or whatever, get all suited up.
Well, and
It's
spend
nature.
a lot of money to get there too. That's another barrier that exists for people.
Yeah. Well, and the idea too that it's it's a two-way, at least a two-way conversation there, because it doesn't have to be so expensive. We don't
that's my
have
point.
to have as nearly as much gear or
No.
connections or orchestration to be in nature.
No, you need a pair of shoes.
That's right. That's right. And
eyes to see what's around you.
right. And if you can't see, take it in with the other parts of your body.
Yeah.
Be in there.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Just recently had a man named Gavin Van Horn on the show, and he's written a book called The Way of the Coyote, and it's about his experiences with wildlife in Chicago. And he's got this amazing list of animals just coexisting right there in what we would say is the quintessential urban landscape. But there they are. And if you take the time and go out and meet them where they are, then you don't have to travel.
Right.
They're right there with you.
Right. I used to live in Chicago for a while, and I had no idea about that, and that's the other the other thing is that, people think folks who don't go into the outdoors are, underprivileged or, poor or, on a banana peel to prison, But the thing is that if that hasn't been your experience, then it just hasn't. Not everybody grew up with access or resources to get to nature. And I'm not talking about resources of money necessarily, because it could have been resources of time. Maybe your family was too busy building a business or caring for you or being otherwise engaged or taking other kinds of family outings and trips.
Right.
And, so that's one thing that's important to understand too, is that it's not a disadvantage necessarily not to have had exposure to it. And at the same time, getting exposure to the outdoors is available. It's important to for people to know that these things, these outings, are accessible to us by way of organizations reaching out, to people in different communities than they normally market to. Like I said, I lived in Chicago. I was fairly active. I was running outside all the time, but I didn't know about trails then. I would run up along, Lake Michigan. But it wasn't until I came here to Chicago or Colorado, where I am literally surrounded by mountains, that
you can't get away from them here.
Let me explore this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so are you seeing signs that this mindset that keeps people sort of trapped in their urban landscape is starting to erode? You're clearly working in that direction. You're reaching out to people. You're taking them out on the trail yourself. Are we making progress here?
That's relative. I think that there are a lot of really wonderful initiatives and great people doing awesome things in this realm. And, it's layered, right? So barriers can be real or imagined. If they're imagined, they're still real, right? So
yes, to the person who's imagined them.
That's right. And so, when I first started taking people out, and even going out by myself, I had family members who said, "What are you doing out there chasing the bears?" Black people don't do that, but just because they hadn't seen anybody who looked like me or who looked like us in the mountains, having a good time, climbing 14ers, backpacking and camping.
And so therefore it's just not done.
And so it's just not done. And that's the easy way out. That's the easy way to say, look, I don't see anybody who looks like me doing it. There's a lot of bad stuff that historically has gone down in the outdoors, in terms of domestic terrorism perpetuated against people of color, right?
That stuff happened in the woods.
That stuff happened in the woods. That stuff happened, that stuff happens in the streets on the way home. Innocent people walking and get gunned down. People lost, knocking on somebody's door, hoping to rely on the kindness of strangers, get shot down or killed.
Yeah, saw a story just today about that.
Yeah. And so there is an idea and a reality that, it could be dangerous. I don't know about it. There's not a welcome. Look at the media. The media doesn't show anybody like me out in the mountains or enjoying nature, or at the beach, at the pool, having a good time. I mean, there have been stories recently about, conflicts at public pools, because black kids are in the pools and, and for whatever reason, there's some sort of altercation and the police are called. Like black people out and, in the parks having a family reunion or a cookout or whatever. Somebody feels uncomfortable, they call the police. Black people at the Airbnb in a neighborhood somewhere, and I don't know these people, I'm going to call the police. So there's a lot of fear and a lot of tensions that are at a fever pitch, and it can't be dismissed that these are realities for everybody, not just for black people, but for everybody on all sides of this thing, right? And so it's not just imaginary or far-fetched to say that black people don't do that, because there's a lot that's ingrained in.
Well, there are reasons.
There are reasons, yes. There's history. There are practical realities that say we don't. At the same time, the truth is we do. And in the doing, because I'm one of them who goes out and does the doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, that's an invitation for people to also, explore a little bit out of their own comfort zone, whether or not, they're going out with me or not. But visuals matter. The optics matters because it dislodges at least some of that narrative that says we don't, right?
Yeah, well, it's visual proof.
Yeah, it's proof.
That at least right here, right now, that's not true.
Yeah, it's proof and it's permission. Like when you say we don't do that, you can't say that without seeing me pop up. Like if you've seen me, you can say it, but it's less true, right? And the more that you see it, the even it diminishes that much more. It holds less power, whether or not you even make it into the outdoors, right? But it says that, what, we can be in new spaces where traditionally folks have said we don't belong, right? And so if the outdoors isn't my bag, you know what, I can go into the science lab, be the only one, and still feel encouraged, because I know there are other pioneers who look like me in different fields, and they were doing their thing. They showed up and they said yes. So I can show up and say yes here. I can show up and have a difficult conversation at work. I can show up. You know what I mean? I can show up.
There's those words again.
That's it. That's the consistent thread, and that is the point of origin, like to new opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a universal human potential. I don't care who you are or where you are.
Yeah.
You can show up for something. That's
right. And we need people to show up and say, you know what, this is not the status quo. All that's dead. Like, we have to choose a new way. We have to have a different level of engagement, because we can't wait for somebody else to come in and make things right. And we certainly can't wait for somebody else to come in and give us permission to be who we might have been in the world.
That could be a long wait, and what a futile one.
Yeah.
As you look around, what do you see that gives you hope? I mean, these are troubled times. I'm not gonna glaze over that fact.
Yeah.
It's true that we're in more turmoil now than we've been in my lifetime. Since I was a child, I really was there in the 60s, but, this is a different kind of turmoil from then. Mm-hmm. Even so, as you look around, is there something that particularly gives you hope?
Yeah, this conversation right now gives me hope, because we're sitting down one-to-one having a real conversation. And I'm a big relationships person. I think that we have to sit down and meet each other where we are in order to get a sense of what our needs are, what our feelings are, what our hopes are, how we can really bridge our divides, how we can really experience true community. And I see that happening a lot just because that's what I'm looking for in my life. I also see the news. I'm not one of those who is looking away from the news, and it is a crap fest out there.
Nicely put.
I'm saying that for the kids.
Yeah.
It's a crap fest.
Right.
But I think we have to each person has to do her part, right? We got to vote. We got to be the front lines of change. What kind of world do we want to live in? I said, moments ago, talk to that person that you want to be, like really envision that community, that world that we want to live in, and build toward that, dial it back and say, okay, what do I need to do to live in that world right now? Well, you know what? Maybe I need to get to know my neighbor. Mm-hmm. Maybe I need to call my father, who I haven't spoken to in a while, who pushes all my triggers.
Right.
You know, because the thing is, it's easy to present ourselves as, real change agents and allies and activists and all this stuff. But if we go home and we're at odds with ourselves, the work is it's all for naught.
It's not going to add up to much, is it?
It's still creating more suffering. So I think working toward the world that we want to be in, Buddha said, "Be the change," or maybe that's the Beatles. Somebody said, "Be the change," and I'm saying it too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's the forefront of human evolution right now, is that we're starting to realize that it really does come down to us. And by us, I don't mean 5 of us. I mean, it starts with me.
Yeah.
If I don't embrace these things myself, then when I do get together with the 5 others, or the 500 or 500,000 or whatever it might develop,
that's right.
What do I really have to contribute? And so
that's right. If you walk out this door and you have a conversation with someone who says something derogatory or inflammatory, like some sort of inside joke because you're both white men or you're both white people or whatever, and you let it go, like, is that in service to creating the world that you want to see?
No.
Right? But the thing is, that's something that you can do right now. This is not you going out, like saving up to march on Washington and finding time on your calendar to do get petitions signed. This is you showing up in your world, in your sphere, really upholding those ideals. This is all so much of it is aspirational, like a world full of peace, but we got to create that. At every opportunity we can. And
those opportunities
abound.
Are there.
They abound.
You can't get through a day without tripping over them. So
that's right.
Open your eyes and seize one.
Yeah. And sitting alone by yourself, you also have lots of opportunities, because our thoughts, we have jillions of thoughts every day, right? And what are we going to feed? Are we going to feed the thoughts of healing? Or are we going to feed the thoughts of separation and strife?
That's the big question. All right, let's get out there and do it.
I'm down.
And I hope to see you on the trail.
You just might.
Christie, thanks for coming by. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching. Join us next week for another great conversation on ThinkRadio Presents Think People.